Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 17 of the Scholastic Sitdown here, hosted by my co host Dylan Ward and myself, Luke Jordan. It is a tear freezing Tuesday here in Chicagoland, and we have a lot of hockey to talk on this day as well. Dylan, how we doing?
Luke, I'm doing pretty good, and I was broadcasting the Winter Classic a couple weeks ago. I thought that was cold. So if that game was tonight, we'd be in trouble. So I'm feeling good. I'm inside, which is good as well.
Yeah, I've taken out my dog twice today. I've heated vest, jacket, hat, scarf wrapped around the mouth, and like these super thick gloves. I still freeze after a good 3 minutes, so does my poor dog, but he's doing fine. So today we'll talk about the week's recap, of course, per usual. Then we have a special guest in David Ventura, a unique one, not only a former player with the SHL, but also a broadcaster for SHL Network. And after that, we're looking to get potentially a Loyola representative next week. I believe that's the last team we have left, right?
Yeah, Loyola. Let's see. I'm thinking. Yeah, we got that. Yeah,
Yeah,
Loyola.
one
That's the
more,
last team we need. Look at that.
one down, or sorry, one to go. We'll take a look
Yeah.
at outside the SHL, then standings, week preview, question of the week, trivia, you know it, and then we'll conclude episode 17. For now, we're just going to jump straight into the recap of the week, and we go back to Tuesday, where at the bottom of the barrel of the top eight teams, it is getting intense for who's going to make it into the playoffs and who isn't. This was a crucial game. It goes to overtime, and Stevenson grabs it in OT. Sean Yurkov with not only the goal in the second to give them the lead, but he ends up scoring an OT winner as well in a crucial victory for the Stevenson Patriots.
Yeah, Luke, you're exactly right. And this was one of those where this game was at Twin Rinks, but Lake Forest had the last change, with their ongoing issues at Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse. And, you know, that didn't phase Stevenson. I mean, these two teams are very close with each other. The shots on goal were very high as well, 43 to 32 in terms of Lake Forest. But with that win for Stevenson, it keeps their hopes alive at the time. But at this point in the season, you just don't feel as satisfied with an overtime win based on the situations. You want to beat Lake Forest in regulation, not let them get any points. So Lake Forest just continues their climb out of the basement of the SHL here late in the season.
It's a good point you make, especially to give 1 point to a team that you're trying to fight with, and they have an advantage on you still. We go over to Wednesday, Carmel and Glenbrook South meeting for the last time in this regular season. Blake Hoffer, a hat trick through just past halfway in the second period as Glenbrook South outshoots Carmel by two, but they win by four, 6-2 here.
Yeah, and this was a 4-0 game after the first period. Glenbrook South was in full control all the way till the end, and you know the shots on goal were Glenbrook South dominated early on, outshooting the Corsairs 20-9 in the first period, but it ended up being pretty close at the end, 34 to 32. And there have been plenty of games this season, Luke, where Blake Hoffer has put two in the back of the net, but this is his first career SHL hat trick. So also the first hat trick for the Titans this season.
Wow, really? First hat trick? Although still at the top of the points in the SHL, he's got 21 goals and 16 assists for 37 points in 24 games played. Behind him is Jackson Steinloff at 33. Then it's Ryan Loftus at 30 points. And by the way, we'll talk about him a little bit later. A big weekend for him, scoring 4 goals within 24 hours. Looking at the next game, we actually had Loyola and St. Viator, and this was a balanced attack from the Loyola Academy Ramblers, who scored a goal in each period. 77 total shots in this one, and three of the 40 get by Brock Hare for the Ramblers as they win this one, a crucial one on home ice.
Yeah, you mentioned a goal in each period for Loyola. It was 2-0 Loyola after, or I should say, a minute into the second period. And then St. Viator came back to tie it, especially with Aiden O'Neill with 1 minute to go in the second period before Gavin Orchowski scored the game winner in the third. So a very exciting game. And Luke, this is the one that we kind of gave a lot of hype last week. Loyola had a 4 game winning streak coming into this one. St. Viator had a 5 game winning streak coming into this one. So only one of these teams was going to keep their streak alive, and that was the Ramblers on home ice.
And how about a crazy upset to finish the Wednesday slate? Lake Forest, although 20 shots on goal, they pot two beyond Adam Silver. And how about this? Logan Marsh stops 40 out of 41. It's an overtime victory for the Lake Forest Scouts, who find a game winner off the stick of Michael Catalano. And the Scouts, really needing to hold on to that playoff spot, grab a huge one against a team that most wouldn't expect them to beat under these circumstances.
Yeah, Luke, absolutely. I think this is this probably goes up there as probably in the top 5 shocking results of the SHL season so far. I mean, it was 1-0 Lake Forest for a long time. GBN actually tied this game up with only 48 seconds left in the third period to force OT. And then if you watch, the highlight is on SHL Network's Instagram, shot by Joel Schneider, of course. The overtime goal to end it was sweet. It was a rush the other way. Frank Catalano finds his brother Michael Catalano, who buries it. The brother to brother connection strikes in OT, and the Lake Forest Scouts. I mean, they're really making their case here to be in this top 8. And when we get to the standings portion, we're going to see just how much they've climbed since a couple weeks ago.
That's only the second overtime loss for Glenbrook North this season. They currently hold the fourth spot out of 11 teams in the SHL standings that we'll take a deeper look into just a bit later. But how about Thursday? One game, another very important one for Stevenson as they were hosting Fenwick, who is currently eliminated from the picture as a whole, just playing for pride at this point. And Fenwick actually outshoots Stevenson by 12, but it's the Patriots grabbing a crucial 2 points, 2-1 victory on goals from Evan Fredden and Brian Wodelko on the power play. Fenwick would answer back in the second period. Nobody would score after that. Crucial win for Austin Morris in between the pipes and Patriots in general.
Yeah, huge win for the Stevenson Patriots. I mean, Luke, we talk about them having a 7 game win streak heading into this, pardon me, 7 game losing streak heading into this week of action. They get the win over the Scouts. They get the win over the Friars. And if you remember when we were talking about standings last week, you were the one who said these are the games Stevenson needs to win. They're going to play Carmel on Thursday this week, which we'll get to in our week preview. But after that, they've got 2 against GBN, 2 against St. Ignatius, and 1 against Glenbrook South as their final 5 games of the season. So in this stretch where you're kind of playing the teams that you share the bottom of the SHL standings with in Lake Forest, Fenwick, Carmel, these are must-win games, and Stevenson is winning them so far.
Only one game on Friday. St. Viator gets a running clock at the end. Ryan Loftus, a hat trick, 7-2 victory in dominant fashion for the Lions on the road at Paul Hruby Ice Arena.
Yeah, and this is the Lions, jumping right back on the ship. We mentioned that they had that 5 game winning streak that was snapped at the hands of Loyola. And, this is, again, one of those games where if you're St. Viator, you're circling this one, saying this is one you should win. And they do in convincing fashion. And, they start a brand new win streak after their losing streak ended.
Yeah, and how about keeping the rhythm? The next day, on the 18th of January, another dominant win, outshooting the Corsairs by 15, not 50. Don't get that screwed up. Don't blame it on me. 5-2 win for the Lions as they win by 3 against the Corsairs. Another road game on the weekend for them, but they handle it well. Another win for Brock Harrer and his Lions.
Yeah, 2 road wins for the Lions here on the weekend. And Luke, if you remember, we talked about this last week. That Fenwick game was at 8:30 p.m. and then they had a quick turnaround. They had to play this Carmel game at 1:50 p.m. the next day. Both of those games on the road sort of has that tournament style as we were mentioning. But yeah, they make no mistakes, and they might have run into a tough Loyola team, but the truth is they've got 7 wins in their last 8 games at the most important time of the year.
One of the hottest in the state. It doesn't take more than just the stats you see to realize it. And St. Viator, like you mentioned, a turnaround of their own. This turnaround for Carmel, not as bad, a little bit over 24 hours. But then on Monday night, last night, if you're watching this on the release date, Carmel was on the road in Chicago taking on St. Ignatius, where they just couldn't keep up with the dominant offense of the Wolfpack. Austin Haynes notably having 2 goals in that one, and they beat the Corsairs by a score of 6-2 at Fifth Third Arena.
6-2, yeah, 31-22 the shots. Carmel actually, it was a pretty even game in general, but Carmel led shots on goal in the first 10-9. They outscored them 1-0 as well. Van Bickers with the power play goal, and Carmel carried a 1-0 lead into the second period, and that's where Ignatius just unloaded Sam Reef, Edmund Burke, James Doherty with 3 goals for the Wolfpack in that second period. It made it 3-1. And then the Wolfpack just sort of never looked back. As you mentioned, Haynes at 2 goals, Meyer as well. Uh, yeah, lots of power play goals in this one too. Carmel gets their first on the power play, and St. Ignatius with 2 late at the end. And the Wolfpack, this is actually their first SHL game in what feels like a while. And actually, if I look at the standings or the schedule, I should say, yeah, it was their first game since January 12th. So 8 days in between SHL games. I'm sure they had CCHL action in there too, but you know, they stay red hot as they climb the standings themselves.
Today is an off day in the SHL on this Tuesday that we are recording and releasing. Tomorrow we have 2 big games. We're going to take a look at those after we have a nice chat with David Ventura, Glenbrook South alum and now SHL Network broadcaster, as we turn it over to him now. And our episode 17 guest is David Ventura, not only a former SHL player, but also a part of the SHL Network broadcast crew at times. He is a versatile guy, and we're happy to have him here on this episode. How are you doing, David?
Doing pretty good, Luke. Dylan, thanks for having me on. I still got a week left before I head back to college, so take advantage of that with the remaining time left.
Yeah, must be nice. For those of the viewers that don't know you, just tell them a little bit about yourself, where you grew up playing high school hockey, and now where you are now.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in the city, and then I played soccer when I was younger, and one of my soccer teammates was playing at Winnetka. So back when I was, the mite ages, when everyone else starts, I actually grew up playing Wilmette hockey. So most of the guys ended up, I knew at high school level played for that Neutra Green or Loyola Gold team back when I was playing Wilmette. So most of the guys I ended up playing high school with played at that Glenview Stars team or maybe some of the other teams. But I grew up Wilmette all the way until sophomore year because I was Bantam eligible my freshman year, which means that I had another year at Bantams. So I played Wilmette up until my freshman year of high school, and then my sophomore year is when I played at Glenbrook South. And now you kind of see the development of how these clubs have formed. Now you have varsity two teams. When I played, there was only varsity or JV, so those were really your only two options. And now they have that whole varsity two program, which is great for the state, really, in terms of the growth of high school hockey.
Well, David, you mentioned in your spiel there that you went to Glenbrook South, played there, graduated in 2022. One thing I just want to ask you is the same thing I might ask any former Glenbrook South or Glenbrook North player is what was your experience in playing on Thanksgiving Eve in that rivalry game?
Yeah, so my experience was a little different just because I grew up playing at Centennial. Like every practice I had essentially was at Centennial because Wilmette was either practicing there at Centennial Ice Rink or in North Shore, and obviously Winnetka was either at Winnetka or in North Shore. So that was almost like a come back home moment for me because that's where I grew up playing my hockey days. But obviously, I've never seen a high school crowd like that before. So that's kind of one of those things where you try to not let the nerves get to you. I remember walking in the stadium, and we were there 2 hours before, and there was people lined up at the door waiting to get in because back at least when I played that North South game, that was their first look at Centennial because that Glenview ice rink got shut down. So we had to find a rink to play it at. and no one really knew what the stadium capacity was going to look like. Obviously, this year it was a little different because they had to adhere to some of those restrictions with the fire department. So that's why it didn't look like what it did before. But I mean, those experiences are great for everyone, especially at the North South game, especially when you're someone on that team that you can rely on. Obviously, for the goaltenders, I can't imagine what they went through in that game. But, for me, it was almost like a come back home experience just because that's where I grew up playing. And then I had to shift over to the Glenview Ice Center. And then I was able to go back and play at Centennial, which is where I grew up playing hockey.
You're still very involved in the community, but in a different sort of fashion. You've joined me for a Glenbrook South broadcast. You've joined Dylan for enough that I couldn't count on two hands, I assume. And also, you're now with the SHL network. What kind of got you into the broadcasting aspect of high school hockey?
Yeah, so obviously high school hockey is something I love. I actually, sometimes I'll watch the broadcast, and Dylan asks me all the time if I'm watching the broadcast when I'm in college, and just so we can put it out there, I do, Dylan. And they are entertaining, especially when Dylan does the games. I know he's going to start doing them with his dad. His dad's going to do color, but actually, so Dylan texted me because the guy that he used to do the games with, Casey, uh, does not do them with him anymore. So he started to ask some of the players who graduated if they wanted to do a broadcast. And I told Dylan I'd hop on. Broadcasting was never something that I had any idea of what I was doing. I took one broadcasting class at Glenbrook South, and I don't even remember the teacher's name. I think Dylan knows the teacher's name. So that, if that shows you how much I paid attention in the class, that was kind of my whole experience with it. So I hopped on a game at the Glenview Ice Center. I think it was that, and I did my best because I didn't really know what I was doing. And then I hopped on another game because I enjoyed it so much. And then Dylan gets a text from Max because during the Thanksgiving tournament, Dylan has all the alumni, or he asked all the alumni if they want to do a game. So that's when I kind of had my opening experience, and then I hopped back on for the winter break because I have those 6 weeks. Dylan got a text from Max saying, "Hey, out of all the alumni," well, I mean, of course, I don't know what the exact text was, but it was something along the lines of, "Out of all the alumni you've brought back, David's pretty decent at this. If he wants to hop on an SHL broadcast, let him know." So then Dylan put me and Max in the same, text chain, kind of introduced us to one another. And I kind of told Max, say, hey, listen, I'm back for this 6 week time. I'm not sure if there's, any openings, but would love to do a game if that's possible. And then that's kind of all where it started. So started last year, I believe was my first year. Got a little bit more involved this year. And then actually my last broadcast is going to be that high school rivalry series on Saturday. The Burlington girls hockey team against Fenwick. So that'll be my last broadcast before I leave on Sunday. But kind of giving back is what this is for me because high school hockey has given me so much. It's not just the memories, it's also the character that you have gained through that experience as well. That's kind of the whole purpose of high school sports. You're not necessarily going to remember the outcome of every single game, but you are going to learn a lot and develop. So broadcasting is something I've kind of fell in love with. I'm almost taking a similar track to what Wes is doing because Wes is accounting. That's my major. So this is something that I do and love to do. Even the preparations for the game are fun for me, which I know is not fun for everybody. So
Well, listen, if you're wanting to be an accountant, that means you use a lot of Excel. So I'm sure that you don't
yeah,
mind preparing those broadcasts. But David, I wanted to ask this question. You go to Miami University, right? Miami of Ohio, and you're in a business fraternity over there with some other former SHL players, and I'm forgetting, which players they are, but what is it like to kind of have these 4 years of them being your rival and hating each other on the ice to go into being in the same business fraternity and kind of having a different connection.
Yeah, well, good question, Dylan. Actually, so the last Glenbrook South game I was supposed to do, or the upcoming one, which is going to be Wednesday of this week, I can't do because we're doing an alumni event. I'm actually going with a few of the SHL guys. So just to name a few, there's two Carmel Catholic guys, David Hernandez, who used to be the goalie for Carmel, John Harrop, Michael Dimoff out of Glenbrook North, obviously pretty notable name out there, as well as Colin Cyphers, who's a Glenbrook North guy. And then we have a Lake Forest player as well. I'm not sure if Lake Forest, I don't think Lake Forest was a part of the SHL at that point. But Charlie Drake, and then we actually had Max Cabal for a little bit. He's no longer a part um, of the chapter, but we had him for a little bit. So there's a fair amount of guys that we had. And obviously, just to kind of touch on that Glenbrook North aspect of it too, because, on the ice, it really seems like those two teams hate each other. But off the ice, for the most part, most of those guys get along well, which actually, Michael Dimoff, who was a rival at that point, because he was someone who was, a threat in the SHL. He's one of my good friends out there at Miami. So we hang out a ton, as well as go to events together. We kind of almost forget about what teams we were in high school. Um, but it's almost like you go to the campus, you have something in common immediately with someone else, and that's the high school hockey part. We actually last semester we had or sorry, 2 semesters ago is when we had an intramural hockey team. So we just got a ton of guys that were in the business fraternity, and most of
Ice
those guys
hockey?
ended up, yeah, ice hockey.
Oh
So we
wow.
actually had kind of that whole roster. So we had a goalie because David Hernandez was the goalie for Carmel. So that was our one worry, was getting a goalie, especially when you're starting games at 11 o'clock at night. But it's always nice to do it with a group of guys that, even though you're rivals with in the SHL, you have something in common, and they're easy to get along with, which is surprising considering what you see on the ice, and kids trying to blow each other up, and just kind of the nature of hockey. So
Did you play at Goggin Ice Center?
yeah, we play all of our
Those
games
are,
at Goggin
yeah,
Ice
it's a
Center.
sweet looking
So that's
place.
they actually have they have two rinks. They have a practice rink, if you will, and then they have the main rink. But most of our games do get played on the main rink because the practice rink gets used for broom ball. So,
That's
I
nice.
can't imagine the ice is the best condition for the D1 team, um, because it gets chopped up pretty well, and they use it consistently all the time. They actually use it for, like at 4 o'clock, once the schools get out, there's like squirts practicing on that ice. So
Wow.
it's that ice is almost used as like normal ice. It's almost like it gets a ton of use, which is really surprising considering the fact they have a D1 team playing on that rink.
Absolutely. I have one more question for you, and it's kind of a sillier one, but Dylan knows I ask every former athlete or current athlete this question. What's your pregame meal?
My pregame meal. That's a good question, because nowadays, like now, it would be a lot different than when I was in high school.
Okay, so then when you played in high school,
Um, I'm sure every high school hockey player has almost the same meal, but Chipotle is pretty popular. Obviously,
I
Chipper
think that's the
is
first
the
time
is
we've
the meal
heard
to
it
go to.
on the podcast, though, out of asking like five, six, seven people. We actually had
Yeah.
Tommy Swift on last week, and he said he eats nothing before a game, and I was like, "How do you function?" So, but no, I think even for a broadcaster, Chipotle is nice to have. Gets you a little natural boost of energy, so
Well,
can't go
yes,
wrong
I
with
mean
it.
Chipotle's go to. I've definitely had a few Chipotle bowls before hopping on the broadcast with Dylan. I don't have to do the play by play, so Dylan's got to be the one talking the whole time. I just kind of have to analyze a few plays,
Give
and
your 2 cents.
I yeah, that's uh, you know essentially right. You just can't go too heavy on the Chipotle. There's no reason to do double meat, double rice before games at least.
Agree.
All right. Well, that's all I got, Luke. Unless you have one more question.
I got nothing else, David. It's been a Pleasure to have you on here for episode number 17. We thank you for joining us today and enjoy that last broadcast you do before you head back off to Oxford, Ohio.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Take
Okay,
care.
David.
Thank you, David. Big thanks to David Ventura for joining us here on episode number 17. Very detailed talk with him and getting to learn kind of not only his college experience with former SHLers per se, but also how he got into broadcasting is kind of cool little nugget as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure to work alongside David, on SHL Network and for the Glenbrook South games. We actually just called it a Paul game last weekend too together. So yeah, it's good to have David back when he is back, and it's always a little sad when he goes back to school because we worked so much together during his time off. But yeah, cool to have him on the podcast, and like you mentioned, Luke, a pretty unique guest, not only a former SHL player but a broadcaster as well.
Not only unique guests, we have a unique outside the SHL segment this week because we're adding a new league that we are going to continue for the rest of the year because things are starting to get tight within the state seeding race and whatnot. So we actually are adding the Metro Girls High School Hockey League to our talks now every week. This will be something that continues on. For now, we're going to start in the IHSHL North Central, where we take a look at the standings over there. BGHW is currently on top. They have 35 points. It is still a very tight race, as we mentioned prior. BGHW with 35 points, Evanston with 34, Deerfield 33, New Trier Blue 32, Chicago North 32. Then it falls off a little bit after the top five to Notre Dame at number six. But I actually got to watch number one BGHW take on number seven Prep this week. Still a couple of my buddies who play for both those teams. And BGHW just really manhandled Prep in that one. It was a 5-1 victory on home ice for the Stampede, and they're still one of my state favorites without a doubt. But we'll take a look over at the CCHL where we've seen some great Red Division talent, and one of them for sure is Bennett, still 16 and 0, still undefeated. They have 29 power play goals in 16 games. Ignatius is in second. Brother Rice is 11 and 5 in third. Notre Dame's 11 and 6 in fourth. And then it's Providence Catholic closing out the top five there. Top eight teams make the CCHL playoffs. St. Rita's holding on to that last spot, but only by 1 point now. Mount Carmel picked up a huge win over the past week against the Marmion Cadets, which has now gotten them within 1 point. So it is a crucial race not only here in the SHL but over in the CCHL as well. In the Illinois West Division, also known as the IHSHL West, we take a look at the standings where Maine is still at the top, Plainfield's in second, and they are having their best year in program history, by the way. There's an article on the IHSHL West website, and it's a great read. Should definitely take a look at it. They're 19 and 6 in second. The Warriors are in third. Lincoln Way has made their way up to fourth, and Glenbard is number five. And real quick, we had a comment on last week's podcast saying that Lincoln Way is the most underrated team in Illinois high school hockey right now. And I was like, okay, maybe they're serious, maybe they're joking. I go and look at Lincoln Way's detailed statistics. They've won seven of their last eight games, and they weren't just, bottom feeders. You're talking about wins against number one Maine, number two Plainfield, and number three Warriors in that 8 game span. The three teams that are ahead of them. So they are really starting to catch up in the West and could be a real threat in the combined division when we get to state coming in just about a month, really. And then over in the Metro Girls High School Hockey League, for those of you that aren't aware, it's split into two divisions at the varsity level. There is a Founders division that is the lower, and then there's the Scholastic division that is the higher. In the Founders, it's the defending state champions actually in the lower division, but still dominating. Seemed their tiering didn't go as planned, but they're still going to be a threat for state because they're outscoring opponents in the Founders division 85 to 15 right now. Chicago Central is in second. Burlington West, who will be playing in the rivalry series game this weekend against Fenwick on Saturday night, is third in the Founders. LFA is fourth, Lake Forest fifth, Evanston sixth. In the higher Scholastic, New Trier is still undefeated. They have 9 wins and 2 ties. They are the only undefeated team in the Scholastic division. Following after them are the Neighbor Valley Warriors, who have made a great step up from last season. Glenbrook, another threat for the state championship, is third at 6-3-2. Fenwick's fourth, who will be playing against Burlington West on Saturday. Maine's at 5, and Loyola is rounding out the top division at number 6. So there's a look at your outside the SHL look, and now let's look inside the SHL at the standings. Let's take a look at the standings. 11 teams, as you know. 6 of them have the playoffs locked up. Not certain seeds yet, but you're going to see that on your screen in 3, 2, 1. There's a look at your standings, and we're just going to run through it real quick and then have some conversation. New Trier Green is at the top, 18-4-1, but they are tied with St. Viator, who has played 2 more games than the Trevians, at 18-6-1, both tied with 37 points. Loyola is in number 3, 17-6-3. Glenbrook North, who's still playing catch up in the amount of games played, is now at 22, 16-4-2 after suffering that recent overtime loss. Or actually, pardon me, that was St. Viator at number 2. And then at number 5, it's St. Ignatius, 15-8-2. Glenbrook South is the last of the teams so far to clinch. Although a cumulative record of 13-12, you would have to wonder, grabbing those critical 1-point games where you're able to get the loss in overtime has been huge for them. They lead the league in overtime losses, and that's helped them clinch a spot. We tend to fall off from there. We go 7 points down to Lake Forest, who has not clinched anything yet, with 24 points through 27 games. At number 8, holding on to that last spot, is York, 9-12-4. Stevenson is catching up. They are one game, they have one game in hand on the York Dukes, and they are 4 points behind. They've won 2 in a row, and Stevenson is very much well and alive. So is Carmel. 25 games, only one more than Stevenson, and they have the same amount of points as Stevenson, but they have lost 4 games in a row, and something to watch out for. And then losing 5 games in a row has been the Fenwick Friars. They're 6-23-0. They are the only team so far eliminated from the SHL playoffs, but that is very subject to change, especially this week. Anything can happen, Dylan.
Yeah, you said it, Luke. And, the big thing that stands out to me is this top of the standings. I mean, yes, you've got different points percentages with the games played, but there is a three-way tie with 37 points. New Trier Green, St. Viator, and Loyola Gold. That is incredible, and that just really tees up the New Trier Loyola game we're going to have on YouTube for you on Thursday. But we'll get more into that when we talk about the schedule. Um, Lake Forest is ahead of York now, so York is now that last team hanging on. And you mentioned Stevenson, a game in hand behind them. If they win that, that's this week against Carmel. They'll, tie them up with 25 games. If they can win that, they're only 2 points behind York, and you never know what can happen here at the end of the SHL regular season. Carmel, they dropped that one to St. Ignatius. It's starting to become more and more unlikely for them as they do have the same amount of points as Stevenson, but the extra game played. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens here down the stretch. And, we've got 2 weeks left here of this regular season before it's playoff times, and there is a lot of action that still needs to take place.
Yeah, and you talk about the Carmel Corsairs. They have four, or pardon me, do they have 5 games left or four? Because I'm seeing four on the schedule, but they played 25 games, correct?
Yeah, they've played 25 games. If you're not seeing that on the schedule, I'm not
So
sure
one
why.
game isn't in there yet, but the four remaining as of right now, it's Stevenson, a game that is crucial for the standings. That's actually in 2 days on Thursday, but then from there, they're going to have to fasten their seatbelts on the road at Loyola, on the road at Glenbrook North, and then on the road to close out at St. Viator. Two of those 3 teams are in a tie for first place as we speak, Dylan.
Yeah, and you know what, Luke? I'm gonna call out my man Sam Schwartz here because I am looking at my final score post I made last night, and the records that I've got for both teams does not look like it's been updated in this SHL standing. So Sam Schwartz a little bit behind on that one, but no, they do only have 4 games left, and St.
Wow.
Ignatius actually has 34 points as they won that game last night.
Yeah, good note there from you, Dylan, because I would not have thought. I would have just thought they're hiding a game from us, but good catch as always. You and
Yeah,
Sam do such a great job with that stuff. Are
that's
there
it.
any other things that stick out about these standings?
Um, nothing really, just the fact that Lake Forest has really turned on the heat. They've got, 7 points in their last 8 games. Uh, and it's caused them to get into seventh. And Lake Forest was a team all season where, we were wondering if they were, either gonna kind of miss the playoffs or be the 8 seed, and they they're now the 7 seed if it were to end today. So I think that's really good on Lake Forest. And I will actually just say this little nugget just because it's fun, and I don't know if we'll even keep it in, but the SHL standings, the reason they're done manually by Sam Schwartz is if you know about Game Sheet, that's what every league in the state uses, but they've got a weird way of displaying wins, losses, and overtime losses, where they'll count a loss as both a loss and an overtime loss. And then there's also a category for overtime wins. So Sam Schwartz just likes to keep it nice and simple, NHL style, to not make people confused, but that does require it to be updated manually after each game. So sometimes it takes a while for them to update.
We have 13 games this week. Let's take a look at them starting now. It's going to be quite the week for SHL hockey. Starting tomorrow on Wednesday, we've got 2 games. Thursday, 2. Friday, 2. Saturday, 2. Sunday, we get 5. So we get 10 of the 11 teams playing. But for now, we'll look to the weekdays where Wednesday, 2 huge games going on. One of them will be one of our SHL games of the week. We got multiple between a 2 day span. We'll get to that in a second, but for now, let's just roll them out and then we'll discuss. St. Viator is on the road at Glenbrook South at the GIC 7:10 p.m. puck drop there. Huge game for St. Viator with a win. And if they can get Glenbrook North to beat New Trier, which is the other game at 7:20, they would actually take over first place. And looking over to the second game, Trevian Spartans at Northbrook 7:20 game of the week. Join Max Anderson on play-by-play. I'll be analyzing that one with Wes down in between the benches as well. And Dylan, these are two marquee matchups.
Yeah, Luke, and also just the fact that they're on the same day and they mean so much for each other, I think is going to be really exciting to watch. The St. Viator Glenbrook South game is going to decide the season series between the two, and Nutria Glenbrook North, as we've mentioned a couple times, this will be their first 3-period game against each other of the season. So it's kind of crazy. Think, two teams with the highest points percentage in this league have not logged a result against each other yet, and they still have got 3 to go. It's going to be an absolute bloodbath. And Luke, just the fact that these two games are separated by 10 minutes in terms of start time, tracking one another from each rink. I know you'll be in Northbrook, I'll be in Glenview. It's going to be a great night of excitement in the SHL.
Absolutely great day to have two TVs or little dual screen action on YouTube.
Both games being broadcasted, exactly.
Exactly. Thursday, another 2 games. Also, two incredibly important games in the standing. We have another YouTube broadcast. First off, at 5:50, in which these 2 games are separated with time so you can watch one and then another. It's Carmel taking on Stevenson at 5:50 p.m. at Twin Rinks. Huge game in the standings, as we mentioned. Those are the 2 teams on the brink of elimination, and one of those teams will be able to at least escape the jaws for now if they can grab 2 points, and the other team could potentially be eliminated. On the other side, at 8:40 Centennial Ice Rink, it's the good old rivalry, Loyola and New Trier. It is another SHL game of the week. So we have 2 SHL games of the week in 2 days. And honestly, Dylan, I don't think you get many better matchups than GB and New Trier on Wednesday, and then New Trier Loyola, of course, on Thursday.
Yeah, and I mentioned it in our standing segment. These two teams are, tied at least in terms of points in the SHL for first place. I mean, you can't beat that if you're a high school hockey fan. A little bit of a late start, but I know for a fact that both schools will be bringing their student sections in force. And Loyola and New Trier always match up really well against each other, it seems like, in terms of the full season. But Loyola actually on the cusp of being swept if they cannot find a win here against New Trier against their rival. So that's going to be a really good game. And then yeah, you talked about it, Carmel versus Stevenson, massive game for both sides who are fighting to keep their playoff hopes alive. We will see who wins that one because whoever will improve their chances by a decent margin.
It's funny, it's seeming like every game this week is putting two teams that are right next to each other in the standings against each other, and we have that again on Friday. It's the Battle of the Saints at 7:10, a rivalry I like to coin with that term that is kind of a slept-on rivalry. And these two teams play each other very evenly. St. Viator won the first game in the season series 4-3. St. Ignatius said, anything you can do, I can also do. Maybe not better, but then they won 4-3. So that will be a very interesting rubber match over in Chicago on a Friday night. Then it's the 7 and 8th seed battling in a Friday night at Addison. And boy, I mean, this is one of my favorite games of the week.
Yeah, that's going to be a massive game for that Lake Forest York game. If you're one of those teams like Carmel or Stevenson who's fighting to get in, you're actually rooting for Lake Forest here to come away with the victory to keep that playoff line where it is at 22 points. That is going to be such a huge game. And I mean, Luke, you said it perfectly. It's like every game this week are between two teams that are very, very evenly matched and between two teams that create a very interesting storyline in terms of the playoff and seeding races. And St. Viator and St. Ignatius, I was on play-by-play for that one on Marquee Sports Network where you talk about that 4-3 final score. Well, St. Ignatius actually tied it up with a minute left, and St. Viator won it just 15 or so seconds later by a final score of 4-3 in regulation. So Battle of the Saints, as you mentioned, very slept on rivalry. I would have to agree with you on that one. And yeah, both those games are going to be so great. And I'm just, I looked at the standings or I looked at the schedule for this week, and hey, had some games circled, but now that we're actually talking about it like this, Luke, I'm just getting more and more excited to see how this week plays out.
Absolutely, and Lake Forest and York are also tied in their season series. So not only St. Viator St. Ignatius a rubber match, but over in Addison 10 minutes later after St. Viator St. Ignatius as well. On Saturday, it's St. Viator playing again. They open up the slate at 6:40, hosting the York Dukes. So quick turnarounds for both those teams under a 24-hour period as they open things up at Mount Prospect. 5 minutes later, it's Glenbrook North and Stevenson to close out the Saturday slate.
Yeah, York and St. Viator will be an interesting one, especially based on the result of the York Lake Forest game the night before. At this point, St. Viator is playing in their third game of the week. They actually have four games this week because they're in against Glenbrook South and then St. Ignatius and then York here. And then, tomorrow or the next day after that, they'll play Lake Forest. But fatigue is going to be really interesting. I mean, both these teams are coming off a quick turnaround, but in terms of the GBN Stevenson game, like another big game for Stevenson and for GBN. You talk about how they've had games in hand all season long. These are them right here. And you don't want to fall into a trap. You want to play, 51-minute game as they try to, really cement. They've had the best points percentage for a long time this season. So they want to finish as that coach's trophy champion.
And arguably the two teams needing huge wins this weekend, going against each other in that Saturday matchup, St. Viator and York. Obviously, York fighting for that eighth seed, St. Viator a chance at the coaches trophy, both in the middle of their weekend slate. They both play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so it's going to be very important play needed this weekend out of both those teams. To look at Sunday, we have 5 games, and we're just going to roll them down the line real quick. Got some good matchups. We start things with Carmel taking on Loyola, in which the Corsairs have beaten the Ramblers this year. So this game is to settle the season series where Loyola beat Carmel 4-0. And then Carmel answered back, or actually Carmel won the first game 6-1, then Loyola answered back winning 4-0. Looking down the rest of the line on that Sunday slate is St. Viator on the road at Lake Forest, who should be playing at Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse back at home after some construction. That puck drops at 4:15 p.m. At 5:30, it's York on the road at New Trier. 7:10, we got North South at Northbrook Sports Center. That one will be on the Glenbrook South Hockey Network, so you can listen to Dylan for what should be a fun one on that Sunday night. And then also an expected Butchcast on Sunday night when the St. Ignatius Wolfpack hosts the Stevenson Patriots. You can always catch a majority of the Wolfpack games on YouTube as well.
Yeah, this is Luke, this is going to be a huge day in the Scholastic Hockey League. And I'm just taking a look right here and I'm trying to figure out, looks like Fenwick is the only team not playing. So that actually means that every team playing on this Sunday is going to have some type of playoff implications unless some things happen earlier in the week. I've got my eyes on Glenbrook North and Glenbrook South. This is obviously such a great rivalry matchup, and to play on a Sunday night, 7:10 at Northbrook. I really like the years where, Glenbrook South gets two home games in the season series because that means we have three different sites for the season series, which is Centennial, Glenview Ice Center, and Northbrook Sports Center. So that's what's happened this year, and I'm excited to see who wins that season series as it's 1-1 right now. Also, two teams I'm excited to see who wins the season series is York and New Trier Green. If you remember, Luke, you had your little meme that you showed back early in the season on the Scholastic Sitdown podcast of
Yanderbilt.
yeah, that's right. Of when York beat New Trier 3-2 earlier in the season. New Trier responded to that later with or I'm sorry, it was actually 2-1 New Trier in the first meeting and then 3-2 York in the second meeting. So they must have met two times very early in the season. And early in the season, we probably wouldn't think this game is to decide the season series or even looking at the standings right now. But this is a York team that has, beaten this New Trier team and lost to them by one goal in the other meeting. So they could easily put up a fight here late in the season. And when these two teams have not played each other in a while, you never know if York's just going to come out with that attack and have a big first period or so. So we will see. This is, I mean, Luke, I've got my popcorn ready every day of the week here. This is going to be one heck of a way to close out the SHL regular season and talk about a stacked week this week. Next week, week 18, is the last week of the SHL regular season, and there are just as many games. And I think Monday is the only day off, which means starting tomorrow, we've only got one day off out of 13 days to close out the regular season.
My goodness. It is going to get chaotic. And with that being said, we've wrapped up the look ahead at the current week, but of course, we do it every episode. So we're going to keep at least up to as much track as we can with all these games filling in. Dylan and I'd say, do a good job at that, and we'll keep that going into next week. For now, let's take a look at the question of the week and the trivia question, which should be a pretty fun one. With that being said, we have reached the final curtain here on episode number 17, starting off with the question of the week. And this question, I want you guys in the comments to answer. Our comments are open this time. I know we had a couple of weeks where we weren't able to get them working. That has changed. We got that all fixed. And now we want your opinion for not only one question, but two questions. First off, who has been your favorite guest on this podcast? We've had a double digit amount of guests by now, so you can really pick anybody. We've picked players or coaches or you just members of 10 of the 11 organizations. We're going to get to Loyola and get that finished up. And then, if you could bring someone in we haven't yet, who would it be? And not only is this just your opinion, but we are going to genuinely take this in and see throughout the rest of the year who we should get depending on your guys' recommendations. So seriously, we want to hear what you have to say on who you want the next guest to be. And Dylan, not to put you on the spot, but obviously every guest has been awesome on this podcast. But do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I think I've got two favorites, and my first one is the first one we ever did with Max Anderson. The other day I went back and listened to episode number one to see, what kind of improvements we've made, just because, it's both of our first time doing a podcast. So I think it's your first time, or like really like this, like a serious one.
Yeah, I did a sports podcast with one of my buddies, but my third episode of that one, I was actually eating popcorn and you could hear it through the mic. So then I kind of quit after that. I was like, that's not my thing, huh?
Yeah, like I've done certain podcasts or whatever, but nothing like serious like this where we do
Yeah.
actually do it every week. And Um, but anyway, so when I was just listening to Max's interview, I just thought it was a really good week one interview. So I thought it matched the situation very well. And I loved what he had to say about, breaking down the story of him and Taylor Ramel starting up the SHL network to where it's grown into now and all the state championship games we do, our partnerships with the Blackhawks and Wolves. I think that was really cool. And my second favorite, or my tied for second favorite, is Ben Stein, the assistant coach of Glenbrook North. I think that one just he was not afraid to kind of open up and share some emotional stories involving the Glenbrook North organization and his own family. So that was really touching to me, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners as well. So those two would be my favorite. But again, every guest we've had, I've loved. How about you, Luke?
Yeah, it gets tough, and Stein's definitely up there for me. I really liked Matt Boeing too. I thought he was hilarious. He brought a heck ton of energy for a
Oh, good.
video call. He definitely kept the audience and us with our eyes wide open. He had some great things to say about the team as well. He talked about how Stein had some nice intel about GBN's organization. We learned some things from Matt Boeing as well, and I just think overall he was a very fun, energetic guest to have. The players have been great as well. We had a former player in David Ventura on today, and we've had multiple current ones. And one of my favorite moments, I was talking to David about it earlier in this episode, was I can't believe Tommy Swift doesn't eat anything before a game, but I'll let that roll on. With that being said, it's trivia time. And this one, I really like this one I made. So, obviously, GBN and New Trier met earlier this season. They never finished the game. The glass broke. The students were getting rowdy, you know, and it made me think. Since I'm prepping for this GBN New Trier game, I said, when is the last time these guys have actually had a final score between the two teams? So, my exact question to you is how many days ago was the last completed game between New Trier and GBN and SHL play? So, from the day it happened to the day of the new puck drop tomorrow night on SHL Network, how many days has that been? And you don't have to go through a calendar and count one, two, three, four. Thankfully, the internet is there to help you. So really, it's not too hard of a question if you just dig deep and find it.
Well, Luke, my question is, these two teams played each other this season in September at the preseason invitationals. Just for all of our viewers at home, does that count?
No, no, I'm gonna repeat. I'm gonna repeat it just so you guys know, because that's a good question. My question was, how many days ago was the last completed game between Nutrier and GBN in SHL play?
There
So
it is.
yeah, honestly, I'm not even sure if I said that at the end, so good catch. But let's just say it wasn't this season. That's your big hint. So the question got even easier. So thanks, Dylan. But they need the help anyway because nobody's putting in answers. So,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
but you guys got it this time around, and we'll actually see you back for episode number 18 coming next week. It's been a pleasure to host number 17 with Dylan here on this Tuesday. We hope you're staying warm because for the most part, when I'm outside, I haven't been, and thankfully, hockey is a game that is played inside. It might be cold, but it doesn't rely on the weather, and that's one of the things I love about the sport.
Well, Luke, before we sign off, I do just want to plug, this is not your official announcement with all the details yet, but we just wanted to let you guys know that we've got something really exciting planned for next
Absolutely.
Thursday, the 30th. We're going to have a live podcast episode. So we'll be in person and it will be live, not pre-recorded like we usually do. And so just be on the lookout for that. We're not gonna. It's gonna be something pretty exciting though. So just have that date circled on your calendar. We'll let you know what time and what it is for sooner to the date. But just keep in mind, on the 30th, we have a fun live special podcast episode. Make sure you follow SHL Network on Instagram to have the latest on what that is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can just say from what I know, it is not going to be a normal episode. So we hope to see you guys next week for episode 18. And then, like he said, episode 18.5. So we'll see you guys then. But for now, enjoy the rest of your chaotic SHL week. And we'll see you next time, unless you're tuning in to the broadcast to catch both of us during this span. If not, see you next week. Thank you for watching.